The news of the Aesir's battle and creation echoed throughout the 9 realms, until they shook the lands of Vanaheim, the realm of the Vanir. Freya, a sorceress, and the most powerful of the Vanir, looked to the horizon and saw the glowing golden top of Valhalla above the green lands of Midgard. Wasting no time, she traveled to this new realm. When Freya reached the creation of Odin and his brothers, she saw great forests and the world tree, Yggdrasil, scraping across the clouds of the sky. Great waterfalls fell from mountains and coursed in rivers, along which stood the villages of mortals. Freya introduced herself, and the locals were in awe at the stranger, who could summon fire from her hands, blow a destructive gale from between her lips, and summon wildlife with but a gesture. With the lead of Freya the Fertile, the other of her kin, Frey, the Endowed, Jord, the Wealthy, and Odru, the Inspired, traveled from village to village, bringing excitement and wonder to the new inhabitants of Midgard, even selling their services of magic to those who had something of interest to barter. Kings, queens and ministers traded gold, animals and honey for favor and curses against their opponents, and the unwavering loyalty of their people. The exploits of the Vanir did not go unnoticed by the Aesir, who called the sorcerers to the golden halls of Valhalla, in Asgard. The wielders of magic were delighted to have been noticed by the lords of the realm, but their glee was turned to dread once the great doors of Valhalla slammed shut behind them, and a troop of Aesir emerged from every direction to encircle them. Thor raised his magical hammer, Mjolnir, against the Vanir, while his sons, Modi and Magni, stood by his side. The 2 youngsters were mighty and broad, but not as large or powerful as their father. Tyr, the one-handed, came forth with his long sword, which he held aloft with ease, while Loki stood, smirking in the shadows, watching the drama unfold. Last appeared Odin, whose single eye glared with power and anger at the 4 Vanir before him. The great old man in long robes bade the sorcerers to the balcony. With wary steps, they followed. From the balcony, Odin pointed to Midgard below. Villages were smoldered with the fires of war, while armies of men marched from one corner of the land to the other, bringing destruction and death in their wake. The land was in turmoil, and the Allfather was not blind to the magical influence behind the sudden chaos. He made it clear to the Vanir that such madness could not exist in the perfect world he and his brothers had created, and the trespassers would be punished. The Vanir argued their case. They sought to bring excitement and wonder to the otherwise mundane denizens of Midgard. What men did with their gifts was their own responsibility. Odin was taken aback by the strong will of these sorcerers. At first, he thought the robed pale beings before him were sniveling wastrels who would cower at the sight of strength. The king of the Aesir made his judgment. The Vanir would be welcome in Asgard, but no longer may they influence the lives of mortals who would use their magic for petty personal gains. So the Vanir lived in the court of the Aesir as guests, and shared their knowledge of the magical realm. Their whimsical ways brought color and wonder to the rigid court of the Asgardians. Even the most strict and hard-headed were delighted by the lively sorcerers. Not only were the Vanir powerful mystics, but also sharp of tongue, quick of wit, and seductive beyond reason. The Aesir were enraptured by their new companions, each vying for their attention and favor. An Aesir was worthless against another, who had the favor of a Vanir. So, each of the honorable lords of Asgard would climb over hill and obstacle just for a single boon from one of the sorcerers, thus being one step ahead of their rivals. The Aesir looked sideways at one another, fearful that their compatriot had more influence or more tricks than they. A sleight of hand there, a spell of forgetfulness, and an illusion or two, and you had the upper hand. The honorable lords of Asgard turned to seclusion and distrust, hidden in their chambers, watching carefully for any sudden spark or clink. Silence and fear reigned over the once golden halls of Valhalla. The Vanir looked for their hosts, but none of the Aesir would see them, in fear of a rival of theirs, trying another horrible trick. Odin was no fool, and saw that all the troubles were because of their dishonorable guests, and summoned forth his kin. Every Aesir burst from their chambers at the call of Odin, and rallied in the central hall. Fathers stood by their sons, and all stood around the Lord of Valhalla. All blame was placed upon the heads of the sorcerers, and the witch hunt began. Freya was caught off guard, in the halls, falling to the first strike of Tyr's sword, and burnt into a pile of ash. With the power of her magic, she rose from her ashes, but only to catch a blow from Mjolnir, turning to ash once again. Thinking they had bested her, the Aesir turned their attention elsewhere, allowing Freya to be reborn and escape once again. She reached the balcony, only to be attacked a third time, stabbed in the back by the hiding Loki. As she turned to ash, the wind carried her remains to safety. Gulveig, they cursed after her, which means gold greed in the tongue of Asgard. The Aesir took to arms, and charged against the rest of the Vanir upon Midgard. Swords clashed, and men fell to their deaths, when the lords of Asgard rushed against their foes. The sorcerers of Vanaheim lacked martial prowess, but their powers beyond the natural world granted them the agility to dodge the deftest swing, block the most fearsome fall of an axe, and blow winds to swerve the mighty Mjolnir from its course. The war of the Aesir and Vanir cracked Midgard down to its core, bursting the fiery blood of Ymir from its depths. The blue sky turned black, and destruction marred the land. The lakes and rivers broke their banks, red with blood, and every speck of grass was covered by a mound of the dead. The black smoke of battle surrounded Odin, bringing him back to the dark memory of Ginnungagap Gap and the wanton chaos wrought by Ymir. All he had built with his brothers lay broken and ruined. He commanded the Aesir to stop, and called for a truce. Both sides had caused wounds and grief to the other, and reparations had to be paid, according to the customs of Asgard. Hostages were shared between the Aesir and Vanir. Freya, Frey, and Jord were to live in Asgard, while Mimir, the all-knowing, and Hoenir, the creator of man, went to live in Vanaheim. The scars of war lingered long in Midgard. Even after every crater and scar was hidden by the dirt of the ages, the soul of the world would forever bear the evil memory of the first war between the divines.